They told you all your life that a dog is just a dog, a companion for walks, a creature to guard the house or fetch the paper. You nodded along because that's what everyone else said too. But deep down you've had moments, rare, quiet moments, when you felt something else stirring behind those eyes looking back at you. It wasn't imagination, it wasn't wishful thinking. It was recognition, and you know it even if you've been trained to laugh it off. You've lived long enough to see how the world changes, how things we once believed solid slip away, how people put their faith in systems that collapse anyway. But maybe there's a reason you still trust your dog in a way you don't trust anyone else. Long before words were printed in books or speeches filled the airwaves, truths were hidden in symbols, in carvings, in the gaze of those who walked beside us silently. The Egyptians understood this, especially one they called Thoth, the keeper of wisdom, the architect of thought. His teachings weren't left out in the open for just anyone to read. They were layered in riddles, scattered in fragments so only those ready to see could piece them together. And somewhere in those fragments was a strange prophecy, a time when the earth itself would begin to shift, when chaos would rise and people would lose their sense of what mattered. In that darkness, help would arrive, but not from kings, not from prophets in robes, from something far more ordinary, from dogs. I can imagine you hearing that and feeling the reflex to scoff. Dogs? As if your beagle or shepherd is some kind of holy messenger. But remember, you've seen things. You've lived long enough to notice the patterns others dismiss. The way a dog will pace the room before a storm hits, or plant themselves by your side when something in you starts to unravel. The way they watch the door moments before someone arrives, without a sound, without a cue. You've told yourself it's instinct or smell or habit. But what if that's only part of it? Thoth's prophecy spoke of guardians of the in-between, beings who could sense what humans have forgotten, frequencies, shifts, the subtle tremors before an event shakes the visible world. He wrote that these guardians would not be here to obey us but to guide us, not through words but through presence, through a kind of language older than speech. And here's the part that gets under your skin because you felt it yourself. When your dog stares into the distance at something you can't see, there's no confusion in their eyes. It's focus. It's recognition. You've noticed the stillness that falls over them, the way they seem to listen to something beyond your hearing. And if you're honest, it unsettles you, not because you think they're crazy, but because you suspect they might know something you don't. This isn't about making a pet into a deity. It's about remembering that in the long story of life on Earth, the human chapter is just one among many. We've acted as though we're the center, the top, the only ones aware. But what if awareness takes forms we've stopped recognizing? We've been taught to think of dogs as domesticated wolves, as creatures shaped entirely by our hand. Thoth's writings suggest the opposite, that they were never tamed in the way we think, that their decision to live alongside us was less about survival and more about volunteering for a mission. A mission to anchor us when the world's noise grew too loud, to remind us of what we'd buried under years of distraction and pretense. Look back through your own memories, the times when you were sick and didn't know it yet, but your dog wouldn't leave your side. The way they woke you in the night, insistent, only for you to realize later that something in the house, or in your own body, had shifted. The time they stopped in the middle of a path, refusing to go forward, and minutes later you understood why. These aren't accidents strung together by coincidence. They're threads in a pattern you've been too busy to trace. Science will keep telling you it's pattern recognition or smell or chance. But you know how often science plays catch up to what our bones already know. You've seen fads in medicine come and go, theories declared absolute one decade and discarded the next. You've lived through enough to know that truth doesn't need approval to exist. Thoth's prophecy isn't asking you to believe in magic. It's asking you to remember what you've seen with your own eyes. He wrote that when the human spirit drifted too far from its source, when we forgot how to listen to ourselves, guides would appear in the form least likely to be resisted. Not wearing crowns or carrying scepters, but wagging their tails, curling at our feet, winning our trust without ever demanding it. And that's why you don't need to force this. You don't need to become a mystic or study ancient scrolls. You only need to pay attention in the moments you've been trained to overlook. When your dog presses against your leg without reason, when they sigh in a way that feels like it came from deep inside you, when they pull you outside just as your mind starts to cave in on itself. These are not random. They are what Thoth described alignments, moments where your path and there's meat for the exact work they came to do. You may have thought you chose your dog. Maybe you signed the papers, paid the fee, brought them home. But if you think about it, if you're honest, it's more likely they chose you. The timing, the circumstances, the way their eyes locked with yours, as if they'd been looking for you longer than you'd been looking for them. This isn't sentimentality. It's recognition. And once you allow yourself to recognize it, the world shifts a little. The next time you see that steady gaze, you might realize it's not just love, it's memory. It's them remembering you, and you slowly remembering them. That's the beginning of the awakening Thoth spoke about. It doesn't start with trumpets or visions. It starts with the quiet understanding that the one lying at your feet may be holding more of your story than you've dared to imagine. And if that's true, then the question becomes, are you ready to start listening? You've lived long enough to know that real change in a person rarely comes from lectures, headlines, or someone trying to convince you they know better. It comes from something quieter, more personal, something that slips under the guard you've spent decades building. And if you've been paying attention since our last conversation, you may have noticed that this is exactly how your dog works on you. Not with force, not with debate, but with a presence that unsettles you just enough to make you aware of yourself again. In the prophecy, Thoth described this phase as the point where the guardians stop simply walking beside you and begin working on you in ways you can't see. This isn't about tricks or obedience. It's about tuning you back into a frequency you've forgotten how to hear. Think about the times you've been carrying a storm inside you. Anger you didn't speak, grief you didn't show, tension you didn't even name, and your dog seemed to pick it up before you even admitted it to yourself. They didn't scold you or tell you to calm down. They just adjusted their position, maybe leaning their weight against your leg, maybe pressing their head into your hand, as if to remind you without words, I'm here. Breathe. You tell yourself it's comfort, but Thoth's writings make it clear. This is energy work. They are absorbing the static, the distortion, balancing you in ways you can feel but not measure. It's not just emotional. It's physical, too. Researchers are finally starting to notice how your heart rate shifts when your dog is close, how your breathing slows, how your nervous system stops bracing for impact. But your bones know this already. You've felt the difference between being alone in a bad moment and being in a bad moment with your dog at your side. Alone, the thoughts spiral. With them there, the spiral loosens. They don't stop the storm, but they give you something solid to hold on to while it passes. And here's the part most people miss. They're not doing this for everyone. It's not some automatic, species-wide reflex. It's specific. Thoth's prophecy speaks of a soul contract, a pairing made not by chance but by alignment. The dog you have is not just a dog. They are your dog in the truest sense, matched to you because your patterns, your blind spots, your wounds are ones they are equipped to balance. This is why certain dogs end up in certain homes through impossible chains of events. You think you found them at a shelter by coincidence. You think they came to you because a neighbor couldn't keep them. But if you map the path backward, if you strip away the explanations you've been given, you see something else. Timing that makes no sense if it's random, decisions that feel more like being guided than choosing. Once they're in your life, the work begins. You'll notice it if you slow down enough. The way they pull you out of the chair when you've been sitting too long with your thoughts stuck in one gear. The way they refuse to let you hide in your own house for days at a time. The way they insist on movement, on fresh air, on reminding your body it's still connected to the earth under your feet. You think you're walking them. In reality, they're walking you out of your head, out of the stale air of your own stuck emotions, back into contact with something alive. You've seen the news, you've watched the world tilt in ways that make less and less sense. Maybe you've felt the pull to disconnect, to retreat so far inward that you forget how to reach out. And maybe without realizing it, your dog has been the reason you haven't gone too far down that road. Thoth wrote that in times of collective instability, these guardians would act as anchors of coherence, keeping their humans from drifting into patterns that would make them harder to reach. You've probably noticed it in small moments, how they catch your attention when you're deep in thought, how they disrupt you just when you've gone too quiet, how they sometimes act up for no reason you can see. But what if that no reason is the reason? They're moving energy, redirecting it, keeping you from locking into something that would pull you further away from yourself. And it's not all serious. There's a playfulness to their work, a way they coax you into lightness without you realizing that's what's happening. They know when you need to laugh, when you need to step outside, when you need to touch something warm and alive instead of another cold surface. This is part of their medicine. You can call it instinct if you want, but instinct doesn't explain the precision, the timing, the way they seem to always know not just what you need, but when you need it most. There's a deeper layer to this, one Thoth hinted at but never spelled out: reciprocity. You may think of your dog as the one giving, but the guardianship works both ways. Just as they balance you, you are meant to protect and restore them. The more you notice what they do for you, the more you realize they carry weight you don't see. They take on your stress, your tension, sometimes even your physical symptoms. And while they are built to do this, it still costs them. If you've ever seen your dog uncharacteristically tired, withdrawn, or restless without cause, you may have been watching them process something they took from you. The question is, are you giving back? Are you making space for them to recharge, to be free of that work for a while? Thoth warned that in the time of awakening, many guardians would burn out because their humans didn't understand their role enough to care for them in return. You've probably known people who wore themselves out helping everyone else and never asking for help themselves. Dogs are no different in that regard. They'll keep showing up for you until their bodies give out if you don't notice the toll. This is where your part in the contract matters. You can't take away the role they came here to play, but you can make it easier for them to fulfill it. You can walk not because they need exercise, but because they need the earth under their paws to clear what they've absorbed. You can let them rest without interruption. You can give them moments of pure joy where they're not working on you. Throwing a ball, running off leash, rolling in the grass. Joy is their reset button. And when they reset, they're stronger for you. You might think this is too much credit to give a dog. But if you look honestly at your life, at the days they've gotten you through without fanfare or applause, you'll realize you've been living this prophecy without naming it. They are healers in plain sight, operating in fur and bone instead of white coats or robes. And you, whether you've wanted the responsibility or not, are part of that work. The more you acknowledge it, the more the relationship changes. It stops being about ownership and starts being about alliance. That's when you begin to see the subtle cues you missed before, the way they move through your home like they're scanning the air, the way they position themselves between you and certain people, the way they avoid certain places like they're stepping around something invisible. You can write these off as quirks, or you can start asking what they're telling you. Because if Thoth was right, and if your own experience means anything, then these are not accidents. They are messages in the only language pure enough to cut through the noise. You don't need to figure it all out at once. Just notice. That's the first act of rebellion against the forgetting, simply paying attention. And once you do, the next steps will show themselves. They always do, especially when a guardian is leading the way. By now, if you've followed me through the first 2 chapters, you've probably started noticing things you once brushed off. The way your dog locks eyes with you in moments you can't quite explain, the timing of their movements, the uncanny way they seem to know what's coming before you do. And maybe you've felt that subtle shift inside yourself too. The pull to pay closer attention, the quiet stirring of something you didn't realize you'd forgotten. This is where Thoth's prophecy begins to move from theory into lived reality. Not in temples, not in laboratories, but in the simplest moments of your daily life. The ancients described this stage as the unveiling, the point where the guardians are no longer just quietly influencing from the edges of your awareness, but stepping into their role fully, deliberately, because the time demands it. You've seen how the world is moving. The pace, the noise, the way truth feels slippery in your hands. And you've lived long enough to know that no politician, no new technology, no sudden miracle is going to restore what's been lost inside people. That restoration has to come from somewhere else entirely. Somewhere immune to the games and illusions. Thoth believed that when humanity reached a point where it was split between forgetting completely and remembering in time, the guardians would act as the deciding weight on the scale. Dogs were chosen because they could reach us where we are still human, in the heart. And they do it without speeches, without doctrine, without demanding that you believe in anything other than what you've already felt. This is where their work becomes sharper. You'll notice it in the way they interrupt you at just the right moment. You think they're being needy, but later you realize you were about to make a choice out of fear or habit, and that small distraction gave you space to think twice. You'll see it in the way they suddenly insist on going outside, pulling you out of a mood you didn't even realize had sunk its teeth into you. And sometimes, they'll hold your gaze in a way that feels like they're not looking at your face at all, but into a part of you you've kept hidden for decades. There's an intelligence in that moment, one that has nothing to do with tricks or training. This is the stage where the guardians begin to bring you back to yourself, not by telling you what to do, but by showing you who you still are under all the years of conditioning. You might not like everything they show you. Thoth warned that the process of awakening is rarely comfortable. A dog's presence can disarm you, strip away the polite masks you've learned to wear, and hold up a mirror to the state of your spirit. If you've ever felt uneasy under your dog's gaze without knowing why, it may be because on some level, you know they can see the truth you've been avoiding. And unlike people, they won't look away. They won't change the subject. They'll wait for you to face it. This is why they are so different from the human teachers and guides you've met. Humans can get tangled in ego, in needing to be right, in wanting credit. Dogs don't care about credit. They care about alignment. They care about you being who you came here to be. And here's the part most people never connect. What they're doing for you is part of something larger than just your life. Thoth described it as a web of guardianship, a living network of human-dog bonds scattered across the world, each one acting like a small point of stability in the larger chaos. Every time you let your dog bring you back to yourself, every time you allow that moment of grounding instead of pushing it aside, you're not just helping your own heart, you're strengthening the whole web. Maybe that sounds too big to be real, but think about how it works in your own life. One calm decision instead of a rash one. One moment of connection instead of isolation. Those ripples move out farther than you can track. And your dog knows it even if you don't. In this phase, you may also notice an increase in what feels like coincidence but isn't. Meeting someone important to your path because you took your dog out at an unusual time. Being pulled away from a place just before something happened there. Finding yourself in a conversation that shifts your perspective completely because your dog stopped to greet a stranger. The guardians don't operate on our schedules. They move according to patterns you can't see but can feel if you start trusting them. That trust is what they're working on now. It's why they sometimes test you, pushing you out of your comfort zone, making you follow their lead instead of the other way around. They're training you to remember how to navigate without the noise, without the constant flood of distraction. And yes, there's something else here that's harder to talk about, because it means accepting that the time with your guardian is finite. Part of their role, according to Thoth, is to leave at the moment their mission with you is complete. Not always in a way that makes sense to your mind, but in a way that serves your soul. You've probably heard people say they lost a dog and felt like a piece of themselves was gone too. That's because in many cases it is. The guardian's presence shapes you in ways that remain after they're gone, but their absence forces you to carry the work forward yourself. This isn't cruelty, it's graduation. And if you've been through it before, you know the truth of it even if you wish it weren't so. But while they are here, the invitation is to participate fully. Let them lead you when they need to. Give them the space to work on you, and the care they need to keep doing it. Don't dismiss the moments that seem strange, inconvenient, or even nonsensical. Those may be the exact moments that change the course of your day or your life. Thoth called this the hour of choice, not just for humanity as a whole, but for each person individually. You choose every day whether to stay asleep or wake up a little more. The guardians can open the door, but you have to step through. And here's the thing. Once you start stepping through, you begin to notice that their guidance was never about making you dependent. It was about making you remember. Remember how to sense when something's off. Remember how to trust your gut before the evidence is visible. Remember that presence is power, and that love, steady, unconditional, unwavering, can change more than argument or force ever will. That's the lesson they carry from a wisdom older than any nation you've ever known. So if you felt that stirring inside, that quiet voice telling you to slow down and pay attention, don't brush it off. That's the voice the guardians came to awaken in you. And in a world this loud, hearing it at all means you're already ahead. The rest is choosing to follow it. And maybe, as you do, you'll realize something even deeper. This prophecy was never just about them. It was about you, about the part of you that's been waiting, watching, ready to rise the moment someone reminded you it was still there. Your dog is reminding you every day. The only question now is whether you're ready to act on it.